Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and today I would like to discuss if Nintendo has abandoned The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, I'm going into this recording with the assumption this is going to be a shorter recording. We'll see what actually happens, but I'm planning on this being more of a simpler video, so it's more of a little bit of a conversation on this topic. And you might be wondering, well, what are you getting at? How could Nintendo have abandoned Tears of the Kingdom, especially with the news or the information, or let's not even call it information, just like the Zelda concert and us seeing the 3 different statues of Tears of the Kingdom that's all come out in the last 24 hours. And that's some cool stuff that is celebrating Zelda and also Tears of the Kingdom. So then, going back to the question, how has Nintendo abandoned Tears of the Kingdom? Well, what I want to clarify on, this is a question that I think is an interesting conversation. I'm not saying for sure they have, but there are some things that have occurred that do have me thinking, oh, Nintendo has treated Tears of the Kingdom a little bit differently, and I'm kind of wondering what's going on here. So before going forward, I will point out that we are still aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers, perhaps by the release of Nintendo Switch 2, hopefully sometime this year. So if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and let's enjoy the ride as we talk about Nintendo every day. So the news that actually inspired me to have this discussion today is coming from Nintendo's recent Q3 earnings release. This is where Nintendo, for their third quarter of the fiscal year, puts out all their numbers and talks about different things relating to their sales. And so Tears of the Kingdom, as of December 31st, 2023, so after the holiday boost, the game is now at 20.28 million copies sold, which is an incredible number. The game came out last May, hasn't even been out for a full year, and it's already over 20 million. That is extremely impressive. But when you look a bit deeper, this is a little odd, because of Nintendo's prior quarterly earnings release, at that point, as of the end of September 2023, Tears of the Kingdom was at 19.5 million copies sold. And so Tears of the Kingdom only sold about 750,000, not even a whole million copies, during the months of October, November, and December. If from May 12th to September 30th, they sold 19.5 million copies, and then from October 1st to December 31st, they only sold 760,000 copies, something changed dramatically there, especially when you take into consideration that the months of October through December are the holiday months. This is usually the time where games sell the most. And this is where it gets weirder. Breath of the Wild, a game that came out back in March of 2017, sold nearly 500,000 copies during this same period of time. When we got the Q2 earnings release, Breath of the Wild was at 31.15 million copies sold, and now it's sitting at 31.61. And so this alone isn't shocking, because Breath of the Wild, the reason why it's gotten so high, is that throughout the entire Switch era since the beginning, it's continued to sell really well. And Breath of the Wild sales picked up during the holidays. But Tears of the Kingdom sales performed significantly worse. Now, at the same time, I think it should be noted that overall sales of Tears of the Kingdom are really impressive, as I said earlier, and that Nintendo is on the record for saying that Tears of the Kingdom sales exceeded their expectations. Now, this isn't specifically for the holiday season, this info came out beforehand, but the fact of the matter is, Tears of the Kingdom, considering how new it is, didn't sell that much better than Breath of the Wild during the holiday season, its first holiday season. And you simply might argue, well, yeah, most people who wanted Tears of the Kingdom bought it immediately. Back when Breath of the Wild came out, there weren't that many Switches out there. Now there are nearly 140 million systems out there, and so most people who want a Switch already have it, and are already ready and available to buy whatever game they'd like. So when it releases, most of them are going to pick it up immediately. And I absolutely agree with that take. I think most of the Tears of the Kingdom sales were front-loaded. It seems pretty obvious. But I do still feel like it's a bit odd that it's sold so little. Here's another comparison. Pikmin 4, as of October 31st, 2023, sold 2.5 million copies. And I'll get to the updated sales of Pikmin 4 in a moment, but what you might notice here is that this is as of October, not September, so that definitely puts an asterisk to the point I'm saying here, but I still think it speaks volumes. because now Pikmin 4 is at 3.33 million units sold. So what that means is, in just the months of November and December, Pikmin sold about 750,000. Very similar to Tears of the Kingdom sales that was spanning a 3-month period. So the asterisk isn't actually in favor of Tears of the Kingdom, but in favor of Pikmin 4 sales here. Because in a shorter period of time, Pikmin 4 sold about the same amount of copies. And what's even crazier about this is that 750,000 copies for Pikmin 4 is a huge chunk of its total ratio, as opposed to a very small fraction that 750,000 is for Tears of the Kingdom. So in other words, during the holidays, the positive trajectory for Pikmin 4 was far surpassing Tears of the Kingdom. And so why is that? Well, you may have noticed, or maybe you haven't, I'll point it out now, Nintendo had a little bit of a holiday marketing campaign for Pikmin 4. Have you ever seen this footage before? I've used it in a few of my videos, and it looks wonderful. It's depicting the Pikmin in the holiday environment. Nintendo was pushing Pikmin 4 for the holidays. And I'm not saying Nintendo didn't push Tears of the Kingdom at all, but I don't remember any special holiday marketing campaigns like this for Tears of the Kingdom. No. And what's interesting about this is that today we got to see this demonstration of the 3 Tears of the Kingdom statues, including Princess Zelda, and we had not seen that before. Now, they're all just basically scaled up versions of the amiibo, and the amiibo did come out around the holidays. But it's just interesting that Nintendo could have shown more during the holidays for Tears of the Kingdom to get us more excited for the game, and they didn't. But they did for Pikmin 4, which I think really does a great job of sort of highlighting the overall point of this conversation. Has Nintendo abandoned Tears of the Kingdom? And based off how they treated Pikmin 4 and how they didn't treat Tears of the Kingdom during the holidays, well, maybe there's something to that actually. But on the flip side, Tears of the Kingdom had a huge marketing campaign. In the weeks leading up to its release, it got its own special OLED edition, and there was a lot of talk and focus on just Tears of the Kingdom for the first part of 2023, and even a little bit beyond that as well. So Tears of the Kingdom had more time for more spotlight. So the reality situation is Nintendo did give Tears of the Kingdom its proper marketing when it released. And maybe Nintendo saw that Tears of the Kingdom likely reached the majority of the audience it was going to reach, but with Pikmin 4, a smaller franchise, it made sense to give it more of a push because they believed in the game and they thought just more people needed to give it a try. And Pikmin 4 is now showing very promising signs of continued growth, and this is very exciting for the future of the Pikmin series. So you could look at it as more of, hey, they're just doing what they can to help their other series grow. And I think that's extremely reasonable. But something else that's interesting here is that Nintendo had a DLC plan for Breath of the Wild. Nintendo has not announced any DLC plans for Tears of the Kingdom. And DLC kept Breath of the Wild in the conversation for longer through the holidays, thus boosting sales for it. They did not do that for Tears of the Kingdom, which I think is another point for the consideration that maybe Nintendo has abandoned, I say that with air quotes, Tears of the Kingdom to some extent. Because they could have put DLC, they could have kept the conversation for Tears of the Kingdom going, which wouldn't have necessarily taken away from the sales of other games like Pikmin 4, depending on how things would have been spaced out. And Tears of the Kingdom might have still had a lot of talk going for it throughout the holidays, but they didn't do that. In this translation from an interview with the producer of the Zelda series, Aonuma, from Famitsu, this was said, "We have no plans to release additional content this time, but that is because we feel like we have done all we can to create play in that world." And this general sentiment has actually been shared in more than one interview with Aonuma about DLC plans for Tears of the Kingdom. Multiple times, we've been told that there are no DLC plans for Tears of the Kingdom, and they feel that they've done everything that they reasonably should in this world. And so, there are no plans for DLC for Tears of the Kingdom, it seems. If they said it multiple times, and we've also now seen that the lack of DLC seems to have impacted its holiday sales, it seems like Nintendo's done with Tears of the Kingdom. Now, is this actually the case, and is there a reason for it? Well, to some extent, I think it is the case. Nintendo has already told us that they have done everything they can for this world, and they are moving on. And so, I think that's actually kind of important because we are expected to be going into a new generation of Nintendo. Typically, when we see a huge Zelda release like a Tears of the Kingdom or other major Zelda releases as the second big Zelda game for a console, this is a strong sign of the end of a generation and the coming of a new generation. Whenever this happens, within a year to a year and a half, we see the next console. And so the reason why I think this happens is because those Zelda games are like that last big final push in terms of software sales. And Tears of the Kingdom, while it did slow during the holidays, still sold over 20 million copies in a relatively short span of time. This was a huge push in terms of software sales for this fiscal year. It's made a big difference for the overall financials for Nintendo. And so it is definitely following the pattern and the expectation of how Nintendo would handle the end of a generation with a big Zelda release as a setup for the next generation. But with that, also comes the implication that Nintendo's probably going to remaster or remake some other kind of Zelda game early on for the Nintendo Switch 2 to get that Zelda fan base over, while also diving headfirst into development for the next big Zelda that's ground up for that new system. And I'm referring specifically to 3D Zelda here. 2D Zelda is a whole other conversation. I'm sure that's coming, but again, whole other conversation. So, in a sense, I do think Nintendo has abandoned Tears of the Kingdom because they're ready to move on to next generation, not just for the Switch 2, but also for the next Zelda games. Tears of the Kingdom took a very long time to come out. It came out very late into the Switch generation. In most cases, Tears of the Kingdom would not have been made for the Switch. Breath of the Wild came out 2017. Tears of the Kingdom came out 2023. It was more than a 6-year wait. Many console generations, especially for Nintendo, don't even get past 5. Now, I do think that trend is changing a bit. Now it's looking more like hardware generations where they're the primary platform are going to be closer to 7 years as opposed to 5. But the point is, Tears of the Kingdom took a very long time. And so I think Nintendo's just done with Tears of the Kingdom from that perspective. On the flip side, though, there is this growing speculation that perhaps Nintendo will release some sort of enhanced version of Tears of the Kingdom. And I think there may be something to that, but I think there's going to be something to that for a lot of different big Nintendo games that came in the last year or so. But I don't think that Tears of the Kingdom on its own with some sort of visual enhancement for Switch 2 is going to be that big of a deal. I think it's just going to be kind of like a part of a wave of games that are going to be meant to showcase, hey, Switch 2 enhances games. Here you go. And that's that. It might be a small little blip for Tears of the Kingdom sales, but it's not going to be something that's going to vastly change the trajectory for its lifetime sales. Now, that said, I'm not saying Tears of the Kingdom won't continue to have some solid evergreen sales. I think putting out some sort of enhancement for Switch 2 will facilitate that to some extent. But I also think at this stage, it doesn't look like Tears of the Kingdom is going to pass Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild is a classic and is still selling well. And while Tears of the Kingdom may have evergreen sales, considering how much of a drop-off we saw during the holidays where sales you would think be boosted to some extent, long-term Tears of the Kingdom is not going to be selling faster than Breath of the Wild. It is right now because of how fresh it is, but that doesn't seem like it's going to last very long. And so I think Breath of the Wild is most likely going to reign supreme for a while longer as the best-selling Zelda game of all time. That all said, Tears of the Kingdom is a fantastic game. Tears of the Kingdom, I think, did what it was supposed to do. It was a fantastic follow-up to Breath of the Wild. They accomplished some amazing innovative things with the physics engine and the mechanics. It was fun to play. It was the highlight of 2023. It didn't meet everyone's expectations, but those expectations were pretty much impossible to reach, but it met the expectations of many. Saw many Game of the Year awards, incredibly high reviews, still incredible sales, and it is important to Zelda history. And I also think it's going to be a good stepping stone to the next Zelda game that I believe will be even better and will impress even more fans, and perhaps that game could become the next Breath of the Wild in the sense that it could become the next high point of the overall series in terms of sales and reaching a larger audience and just impressing people in a lot of different ways with new hardware and probably several years of development and all the knowledge they obtained from both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and the lessons learned after the fact from fans' responses. It's going to be very cool, but it's also going to be a while from now. But what do you all make of this idea of Nintendo having abandoned Tears of the Kingdom? Is there merit to it in any way, or do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.